What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Mover Mailbag. I hope you guys are having a great week and enjoyed the Camaro track video. It was a lot of fun to make. On today's episode, I wanted to start out with a question I've been getting a lot in the comments and Instagram and email. So I'm not going to read any specific question, but it's a question from a lot of foreign aspiring fighter pilots that want to join the United States Air Force or United States Navy and become a fighter pilot in America. And they're asking, what do you have to do that? Well, first thing, you have to become a U.S. citizen. And that's not specific to being a fighter pilot or a pilot in general. It's U.S. code for becoming an officer. You have to be a U.S. citizen to become an officer, and you have to be an officer to be a pilot. So that's step one. That answers a lot of questions. There are exchange programs with other countries where they'll come out and fly. For example, when I was at VANCE, which is Joint Specialized Undergraduate Pilot Training, we had Italian pilots flying with us, we had Portuguese pilots flying with us, and then at NJEP, Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training, there's also various countries flying with us, and there's exchange tours operationally as well. But if you want to be a U.S. fighter pilot, you have to be a U.S. citizen. So that's just the answer on that one. This one is from Elijah, and he is asking about schooling. And he says, "Hey Mover, I'm still deciding on what I want to go to college for, and I plan to fly commercially after the Air Force. Wondering if an aeronautical science degree in flying would be worth it to make myself more likely to get a fighter." Elijah. As I talked about in another video, no. It won't hurt if you've got a good GPA. It's a good background to have. It's, you know, it'll help you get a slot maybe if your GPA is high enough, but a degree is a degree when it comes to being a fighter pilot because of the process. Because once you get that pilot slot, whether you get a fighter or not, if you're active duty, is all about class ranking and how you do in pilot training. And if you're a reservist or a guard guy or girl, you will already know by the time you get to pilot training because you've gotten hired by a unit that flies fighters. So as long as your GPA is high, it couldn't hurt, but will it help? No, it won't really do anything for you. Your degree doesn't really matter. This comes from James. James says, "Hello, CW Lemoine. Thanks for all the great videos. Just want to ask you a few questions about the Air Force Reserve." I know about that. I was a reserve baby, as they call it. I was hired initially by the Air Force Reserve and am currently in the Air Force Reserve, so that works out. You mentioned in your last video that you flew operationally for 4 years. After you finish pilot training as a reservist, how long does one typically deploy as a fully operational airman before you get a civilian job? Does it depend on different factors? Also, how much do you work as a reserve pilot? Is it 1 weekend out of the month and 2 weeks out of the year like a traditional reservist, or are there different schedules? Thank you again for the information, James. I've got about almost 8 years of active duty time now over my career for as many times as I've taken orders and stuff like that. I was an F-16 pilot for 4 years, and during that time I was on orders the entire time. So the way it works as a reserve fighter guy, because it changes, it depends on if you're flying heavies or fighters or whatever. You will be active for at least 2 years because that gets you through pilot training. And then after you finish your B course, which is the basic course, which is the airframe you're going to fly, you're going to get what's called seasoning days. And seasoning days depend on what you're flying. For the F-16, at the time I was doing it, was 1,095 days. So you're active duty for that whole time. So that's about 5 years from start to finish. Will that change? Yes, it depends. It just depends on the airframe, and it depends. But you can expect about 5 years of orders to become seasoned, to become proficient in your aircraft, and that'll get you to about 4-ship flight lead to instructor pilot level by the time you finish, just depending on how things are going within the unit. So with that said, to answer the rest of the question, so once you're a reservist, and let's say you get to the end of the 5 years and you don't want to be a full-timer, because there are AGR, which is an active duty job within the squadron, and there's ART, Air Reserve Technician, which is a GS-13 job within the squadron that can be full-time. GS-13 is a civil service job where your civilian job is to fly fighters in the squadron, but you're also a reservist there, so you're kind of doing both. And then the AGR is just like active duty. So how much do you work as a reserve pilot? It depends on the unit. Different units have different requirements. A lot of fighter units require about 8 to 10 days a month and that's just because of RAP, which is the it's a tasking message. That's how many sorties you have to fly a month. For an inexperienced guy, it can be anywhere from 8 to 10 per month, and for an experienced guy, it can be closer to that six per month. So you have to be able to make RAP every month and have your civilian job as well. So it's more than 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. You get what's called AFTPs, which are additional flying training periods to pay you while you do that, and you have a certain number depending on Guard and Reserve. It's 48 a year for the Reserve, and some units for the Guard are 72. But you get those periods. It's 2 a day essentially. You'll get your flying done that way. So yes, it's much more of a requirement than just a normal reservist 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. But it just depends, and that's going to be what your unit requires for you to stay current, because that's the biggest thing is currency. When you say deploy as a fully operational airman, deployments are every 18 months typically, and that depends on the unit as well, so there's no hard and fast rule on that. All right, this comes from Drew. My name is Drew. I'm currently in high school and have a few questions. First off, I've always wanted to go through the Air Force Academy route and become a pilot, specifically an A-10 pilot, which brings me to the first question. Do I get to choose what I want to fly? Is there specific training for each aircraft? So I'm going to put the link in the card or description or whatever, but I did a video on how the process works. But you, as an active duty pilot trainee, what you fly depends on your class ranking, needs of the Air Force, and whether you track select or not. So you go phase 2 in pilot training. You'll track select from T6s going either T-38s, T-1s, T-44s, or helicopters. That's just based on your class ranking of how you choose and what's available. And then once you finish T-38s, that's when you'll get your assignment. Some guys go to first assignment instructor pilot positions where they come back and teach in pilot training, and some go to ad-air squadrons now. That's a new thing, like where I'm at now. They'll go to the T-38, they'll be there for a little while, and then they'll get their assignment after that. So you always can put a preference worksheet in, or whether or not you'll get it just depends on what's available or what's going on with AFPC at the time. So, but check out that video. I really went more in depth on how the process works. Something that has really bothered me is people calling the Air Force the Chair Force, and that it's full of nerds. They're all serving this country equally as well as the Marines, but they don't get much respect. Because of this, I thought about going to the Navy to become a pilot. I understand that I should follow my gut, but I'm really stuck right now between the Air Force Academy versus the Navy to become a pilot. Any advice? Who cares what people think? There's a friendly rivalry between the services, and this has existed since all the services started, and it will exist through time. I mean, Marines are crayon eaters with double-digit IQs. It's just a joke. It's not. No one really thinks the Air Force is a chair force. Now, there are some factions of the Air Force that are absolutely nerds and that are absolutely the chair force and that are basically just bureaucrats. That's a given. But when you talk operationally and you talk the fighter community and the heavy community and the pilots and TACPs and the people that actually are at the pointy end of the spear, no, they're not the chair force. It's just a joke. I would not let to be a fighter pilot, you have to have a thick skin, because people are gonna give you friendly ribbing. People are gonna debrief you, critique you, all that stuff. You just have to let it roll off your back. Who cares? Especially if you're going to the A-10. The A-10 is probably one of the most respected aircraft by ground pounders, especially Marines and the Army. The Burr. I mean, people love that. It's the sound of freedom, and it's the sound of we're putting warheads on foreheads. So it's definitely not something I would make a career decision. And plus, there are nerds in every service. There are nerds in the Navy. There are nerds in the Marines. It's just I wouldn't base anything off of that. If you want to go to the academy, go to the academy. If you want to be in the Navy, go to the Navy. I will say the best of all worlds to me is still the Guard Reserve. It's the best kept secret, because you go there, you know the squadron, you know where you're going to live, you know what you're going to fly. So it's a good deal. All right, and finally, I'm also interested in being a helicopter pilot, but I haven't done much research on it. Well, do more research. Is there helicopters in the Air Force? Yes. In fact, it's probably, there are multiple missions for helicopters. The nuke mission, where they do security for the nuclear weapons at the ICBM sites and stuff. But one of the coolest missions, the Pedros, and there was a series on I think Nat Geo about the Pedros, where it follows the search and rescue, combat search and rescue, but they follow the PJs, which are the pararescue jumpers, and the combat rescue officers, the guys that go in, and these are some hardcore special ops guys. The guys that go in when an aircrew gets downed, or when somebody gets, it's a hot landing zone. They go in and they will pull good guys out of bad guy territory. So it's a very badass mission, and it's very cool. And we have that. I mean, there are multiple reserve squadrons that do it, Tucson and Patrick, and there's active duty squadrons that do it well. So you would not be doing wrong by wanting to go helos. Thanks for your time, Drew. This email comes from Tyler, and Tyler says, "Hi, my name is Tyler, and I'm working on a school project researching the careers we want to pursue. Would you be willing to answer these questions for me? Number one, what made you want to become a pilot?" I'll link to that video. It's probably too long for a Mover Mailbag, but essentially, I've always been interested in flying. I've always loved airplanes, and it just being a fighter pilot's awesome. There's nothing else to say about that. But I'll link that in the description. How I became a fighter pilot. Put a card up here too. All right, number two. What are some of the good things about being a pilot? Well, depends on what you're talking about. For fighter pilot, it's serving your country. It's mission. It's job satisfaction. It's a sense of accomplishment. It's challenging. You're working with some of the best people you'll ever work with. I mean, they're highly intelligent, highly capable human beings that are working towards a common goal. It's a brotherhood. For the airline side or the commercial side, you get good quality of life. You get a good schedule. You're not working a 9 to 5 in an office. You're out and flying. And the pay is very good. The pay and benefits are awesome. Number three, what are some of the downsides? Well, again, it depends. With exercises and deployments and stuff, you're away from your family more than a normal 9 to 5. It's dangerous. It's not the safest of jobs, but we try to mitigate risks as much as we can. For a fighter, it's hard on your body. The older you get, the more you do it. You'll have neck problems, you'll have back problems, you'll have knee problems from running. It's just something that takes a toll because you're like an athlete, and you're definitely trading off an awesome job for the price you pay with your body. And again, when you go to the airline side, being away all the time. Having sometimes when you're junior, you're having to sit reserve in cities where you're actually sitting there. I think some of the pluses are also the downsides. It's just, the schedule and stuff can be not the best. But, as you do it more, you get more senior and it gets better. Number four, what was your experience with your schooling? Was it challenging? Same link as above. I talked about it and how I became a fighter pilot. Absolutely, it's challenging. It's going to pilot training is probably one of the best experiences I've ever had, because you'll meet people that will be friends for the rest of your life. And it was a challenge, especially when I got to Introduction to Fighter Fundamentals, where I was going from just flying the jet to now having to tactically employ the jet in a more stringent environment. I did struggle a little bit with that and overcame. The centrifuge, pulling 9Gs was tough. Survival training is not easy, and then just it's challenging, but it's not something you can't overcome. It's just something you have to work towards, and you have to have a positive attitude and help your brother or sisters out, and just make sure everybody gets through, cooperate to graduate. Number five, do you have any tips for me? None that I haven't already posted. Watch the other videos, go to the websites I talked about, make them tell you no. I just wanted to do a nice one. It's not actually a question, but it's a Mover Mailbag. It does count. This one says, "Dear CW Lemoine, just a quick note to let you know that your videos are great, which I accidentally found a few weeks ago. They keep me positive at the forefront of my thoughts in my daily endeavors. You have often made me smile, lifted my spirit, inspired me, and gave me more cause to be grateful for my many blessings. You're special. Keep up the good work. Thank you for your service. By the way, love your dogs. Kind regards, Emily. Thanks for the kind email. I appreciate it. Hey, the Mover Mailbag's not just questions. You guys want to send nice stuff like this too? I appreciate it. So that'll do it for this week's episode of the Mover Mailbag. Actually, this week I got a couple things. I'll probably have a couple more videos. One doing, because this is an author blog, I've got a new book coming out. So I'm going to do a book cover reveal and pre-order information on the next book. And then Friday happens to be the 1-year anniversary of me buying the Blue Beast, the Camaro. So I might do a little review on the 1-year ownership of that car. And then that also means, because that was the very first episode, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of this vlog totally, which is 44,000 as of this video subscribers in a year. Is pretty amazing. So also I'll talk about how we deal with emergencies, because I've been promising with that for a while. And we'll just keep going and see where it goes. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time.